Now Ayrshire Radio Podcast presents Ayrshire Insights with Elliot Boyce.
Welcome back to Ayrshire Insights with me, Elliot Boyce. In this week's Local Legend Spotlight, we are going behind the curtain at one of the southwest of Scotland's leading law firms with the current managing partner at McKinstry Company, Robert Honeyman. Robert, good to have you on.
Elliot, thanks for having me along.
Thank you very much. Now, before we find out about how it all started, we want to know the type of lawyer that you really are. So, the big questions: law and order or suits?
Suits.
The bill or line of duty?
Old school, the bill.
Columbo or Taggart?
There's been another murder. It's got to be Taggart.
Coming up, we're going to hear how a lot of hard work, late night study sessions, and I'm sure a few parties ended turning into running one of Ayrshire's largest law firms.
You're listening to Ayrshire Insights with Elliot Boyce.
Now Ayrshire Radio.
We're hearing how it all began. Now, before we get started, Robert, do I need to apply for legal aid? I hope this isn't billable hours.
Just a couple of charges. I'll send the bill across after I see it.
That's fine. We'll pass that on to Keith and you, and hopefully they can sort that out for me. But Robert, listen, where did it all start? So, where did you grow up?
Grew up in Largs and born 1974, a long time ago, Elliot, and I went to Kilburn Primary and thereafter Largs Academy, and after Largs Academy it was the joys of Strathclyde University from 91 till 96.
So you can tell me that it was all study there, but there must have been a few stories during your uni days.
Well, Strathclyde was always about a bit of a drinking session, and it being right bang in the centre of town, it made it very accessible for all the local establishments. And Strathclyde was known for having the massive union. For anybody who can wind the clock back to the early 90s and can remember the early 90s, Strathclyde had this mad union that went for I think 10 floors, so there was just monster partying within the union. But round the corner from the uni was a place called the Press Bar, was basically where all the guys from the Herald and the reporters and everybody went drinking, and it was just round the corner from the uni, which was always a great hangout and helped the studying.
And talking about the studying, so for those people who are maybe earlier on in their career, still in school and looking to get into law, what course was it you studied? What was your kind of university course that you went with?
So university course was law, and I did straight law. A lot of people nowadays will do law with a language, which is pretty popular, or they'll do law with economics or something along that, where they'll conjoin it with something else, really just to make their course a bit more diverse. And I didn't do that. Maybe I was just too much of a geek when I went to university in terms of doing law, and maybe I just wasn't smart enough to be doing the rest of it. But I managed to eventually persuade Strathclyde to let me in after Glasgow and Edinburgh said no chance. And yeah, 4 years at Strathclyde before you do the diploma, and which is something you have to do and still have to do. Even back then, they'd recently introduced a diploma, and now you still have to do it.
So part of the course, was there an element of kind of work experience that you had to do in order to obtain it, or was it just straight course?
Just straight course. No, there was none of that. It's much more now about get into a workplace, get some experience and try to do some practical stuff. There is a limit as to what you can do, and there's a limit to what firms will let you do, but it's much more encouraged nowadays. And there's more practical elements to the courses, that they do things like virtual firm work, which you didn't do back in the day. And I make myself sound ancient by saying that, but you just didn't do it because a lot of it is now driven by technology. A lot of the stuff that is done within the university is technology driven. And if listeners can remember back to the 90s when you actually didn't have the internet, then that was it. We had no internet, no email. You typed your dissertation in an old school word processor, and yeah, half the folk are turning off now because they're thinking, who is this old fart on the radio?
Back before the dial-up connection.
Yeah, that was it, exactly.
Now, well, I've heard about the early days, but I'm wanting to find out a little bit about the big wins and the biggest lessons we're going to do just after this.
Now streaming
Ayrshire Insights, hosted by Elliot Boyce.
This is Now Ayrshire Radio.
Now, we've heard about the early days. Now, let's talk about the business and law journey. So, Robert, what made you get into law in the first place?
Really, Elliot, it was kind of just down to I wanted to make a lot of money. That was primary 4. Primary 4, I remember, and I don't actually remember it, but my parents remembered it and cast it back up to me that I wrote some diary entry in primary school with my teacher at the time, which was a lady, Mrs. Watson, and they asked me, what car would you like to drive? And back then I decided that it was a Rolls Royce Estate was the car that I wanted to drive. Don't even know if that car ever existed, but it seemed like something would be ridiculously expensive. And how was I going to fund that? Well, the only way you're going to fund that was being a lawyer, because the thought was LA Law, which was the Suits of the 80s or the early 90s, was the programme that said everybody can live this wonderful, sexy lifestyle in LA and you can drive a mega car. And I thought that I would quite fancy that. So that was what took me into it.
Was it family? Was there anybody else, or was it just watching LA Law?
Probably pretty much just watching LA Law, because nobody in my family was a lawyer, and people often think if you're a lawyer, you've gone to law school or become a lawyer because your family have all been in the law, or you've got loads of friends that are lawyers. I had nobody. Basically, my family had largely never been to university, or I should correct that. My mum went to university for her first year and then dropped out, and she'll kill me for saying that. But that's the extent of university experience in my family. Nobody else went to university. They went out of school and went into a job. I was the oldest sibling. My wee brother and my sister were still at school, and I was the first one to go to uni, and it was just try to get into uni in the first place, get into uni, and then try to get a great job at the end of it.
You got into uni, you went through along with the parties, you went through a lot of work in order to obtain your degree. I take it from that point, you put all the work in, you've got your degree. Were you straight into practice, straight into work?
No, not at all. And people think that you finish university, and there'll be kids today that will be coming out the back of university and thinking, oh, it's great, I'm going to finish university, I'll be straight into a job and earning this wonderful salary. And my experience was there was nothing further from the truth. I just couldn't get a job. At the point I finished university, came out in 96 as it was then, and applied. I wrote so many letters that I just couldn't afford any more stamps and just couldn't get a job, to the extent that I thought, right, should I continue to look for a law job or go elsewhere? And I did a 6-month placement somewhere, and then I got an opportunity through a pal to go back to university and actually work in the law masters department, which was really just helping students who were going on to the legal masters division. And whilst I was there, somebody put this notice in the notice board saying they're looking for a trainee at the McKinstry Company. I'd never heard of the McKinstry Company, and Graham will kill me if he's listening to this for saying that, but I'd never heard of the McKinstry Company, and they were down in Ayr. I stayed in Largs still at the time. I was working up in Glasgow, and I thought, right, okay, it's worth a shot. And one of my colleagues said, apply for it. But at that point, I had pretty much sacked off the idea of actually being a lawyer. I was going down the road of, I was going to go into banking and I was going to go into insurance. And at that point, I was through a process of getting a job elsewhere.
For me, it tells a lot about, and a lot of people that are similar circumstances, been to uni, struggling to get a job and perhaps give up. One thing that was quite funny out it though, Robert, is you've mentioned 2 other professions, both of which that have probably got the same kind of salary expectations, isn't it? So you went, I want to be a lawyer to make some money, didn't get a job as a lawyer. There's banking, there's insurance, two different industries that are both pretty good at making money. So is that, do you think, and going back to the primary 4 classroom that you maybe don't quite remember, were you very financially motivated from a young age in terms of work ethic and wanting to do things?
I was always interested in working hard, and I've always worked hard, and since I started this job 28 years ago, I've always worked hard, probably too hard, my family would say. But back when I was then thinking of going to a different career, it was a thought of maybe law isn't for me and maybe I'm not right for law. I was always, at school, I was great with maths, I was great with figures. And the thing that I really struggled with and that I wasn't great at was English. I was really poor at English, which as a lawyer, you would think that's got to be your strong point. I just wasn't good at it. And I managed to scrape through with the English and got enough in my higher to get into uni. But when I was then couldn't get a job, I thought, well, maybe I should go back to what I really enjoyed and what I was good at, which was the figures. And that was why banking and insurance was the way forward. But yeah, you're right. It was about where can I still make a decent living out of this?
Totally, and at the end of the day, it's as much as there's lots in it, money does make the world go round as well, and it's important to have a career that lets you live to your aspirations. Now, the McKinstry Company, we've heard a lot about you in your younger days, but what for people that have maybe seen the McKinstry Company, heard of the McKinstry Company, what's the history of it from 1984 to where it is today?
So my colleagues always tell me, Elliot, that I talk far too much, so I'll try and tell this story very quickly and not take the whole programme. But basically, we start in 1984, what was Miller Road, and that was Graham McKinstry then with a couple of staff. We moved to the Sandgate, and we'd have the middle floor in the Sandgate. For those who have ever been in our office in the Sandgate area, they'll know it's a huge sandstone building that we now occupy the whole lot of. But at that point, we had the middle floor and a couple of offices, which gradually led to us taking over the whole building and going from what was a criminal legal aid practice nowadays to a practice in the high street, which covers pretty much everything that you would expect lawyers to cover that you might require on a day-to-day basis, other than the fact we don't do any criminal now. So what we started with, we now don't do. And that was really just a process of the evolution of our business and how we were able to properly serve and look after our clients. And we identified about 15 years or so ago that the way in which we can best serve clients who are charged or in that situation was to separate out that part of the business. One of our very good colleagues took over that part of the business and now runs that as a very successful business within AIR himself. And that allowed us then to focus on the other parts of the business and grow that. And we've now got our offices in Dalry and in Girvan. And we've gone from the 3 people to almost 50 of us now.
An incredible success story here in Ayrshire. And as all businesses, things evolve and change over time. Now, going back to yourself and your journey within law, I'm sure over the years you've been involved in many cases, but what would you say the biggest win for you is?
I talked earlier, Elliot, about the financial motivation for actually becoming a lawyer, and I wouldn't like people to think that that's just the absolute driver for what we do as lawyers, because it certainly isn't, and people shouldn't be deluded into thinking lawyers, it's all just a big bucks job. It's not Suits, it's not LA Law, unfortunately, but it's a good job that provides you with a good level of remuneration, as many jobs do. But probably the biggest thing in the job is the client satisfaction and the ability to be able to look after and help people. My biggest driver, to be honest, Elliot, and the thing that really gets me out of bed in the morning and allows me to enjoy the job, I see the variety of people and clients that I get to meet over the piece is brilliant. And I suppose in terms of the cases that I've been involved in over the years, there's been many of them, varied cases where we've had a whole host of different issues that we've had to tackle. The type of work that I do, dispute resolution, personal injury, there are often cases where there's a lot of emotion involved. We can have fatalities and people have lost a loved one. And those cases are the ones where you develop a really close connection with the people that you are dealing with, because you know that they have had a hugely difficult experience and you're just trying to get to a point where you can ensure that there is a light at the end of that tunnel and hopefully get to a point that you're able to bring some form of what might be considered a successful outcome for them, which is often about getting the answers and getting to a point where they can close down that case and hopefully then get on with the rest of their life. And we've had some really good cases about that where we've had that type of experience, and that it's a privilege to be involved in that and to get to know those people.
Building relationships and rapport with people and helping people is fundamentally a massive part of what you do. Now, throughout your time and being your biggest wins, I'm pretty sure from somebody that's been in law and been involved in such varied amount of cases over the years, there's got to be some funny stories. So what would you say is one of the funniest stories that you're able to tell us in your journey through law?
Over the years, there's been some absolute crackers. There's no doubt about that, Elliot. And I suppose one of the things that sticks out for me, and I always have to be very conscious of trying to keep confidentiality here, because that ultimately is the golden rule as far as a lawyer is concerned. But without naming any names, I had this wonderful case where I remember, I can take myself right back to, I'm in Kilmarnock Sheriff Court. And for those that have been Kilmarnock Sheriff Court, they'll know that there's a number of wee courtrooms that are a bit more intimate. And I'm in, I think it's Court 3 I'm in, and there's a number of other solicitors who are hanging about, and we're generally hanging about waiting on one of the lawyers coming on the bench. And at that point, my phone goes, so I've got my phone on, which is fine because there's nobody in the court other than the lawyers. And I take this phone call from my receptionist in what was our Barn Street office. We used to have 2 offices in there. And my receptionist, Sarah, tells me that somebody has appeared at the desk and they've dumped a box on her desk. And at that point, I'm really not terribly fussed about this. I'm thinking, well, and so what? And she tells me it's full of cats. And I said, that just...
Cats?
Cats, meowing cats. Not stuffed furry cats, but meowing cats. And I said, that can't be right. And she says, no. There's a box. So a storage, what you might understand is a storage folder box full of cats.
Wow.
And she said, I don't know whether I should open it. And I said, well, why are you phoning me about it? And she says, well, it's the person on the other side of your case who came in and shouted the odds at me and dumped this box on my desk and told me that your client's got to deal with it. So that became this wonderful story within Kilmarnock Sheriff Court, because colleagues who were hanging about in the court then got to learn of the poor cats and what was going to happen about the poor cats. The happy ending to the story is my client was wonderful and looked after and was able to resolve the dilemma of the cats, who remained in our office for the rest of the day and were very ably looked after by poor Sarah. But we had cats roaming around our Barn Street reception for the whole day, which I think was quite entertaining and a nice distraction for my colleagues. And the long story, or the short story long, or long story short, is that every time I went to Kilmarnock Sheriff Court, probably for the 6 months thereafter, nobody cared about any of the cases I was involved in, other than, are the cats okay?
Are the cats all right? That is unbelievable. And I have to be honest, I'm pretty sure that there's probably law firms across Scotland that have some weird and wonderful things dropped off at the reception, but I have to say, in a divorce case, to walk in and go get those cats, you're lucky it wasn't a Friday afternoon. You couldn't get hold of your client, I'll tell you that one.
Absolutely.
You could all taking a wee cat home for the weekend. But there is certainly some funny stories that I'm pretty sure has happened over the years across law firms in Ayrshire, not just yourself, but I don't think many's going to trump the cat story. Your journey within law, and this is where I want to bring the business aspect into it. So, yeah, solicitor, you've been involved in many cases, some stories of those cases, but moving into the management side and the kind of business and operations side, you getting appointed as partner. Was it always a dream for you to go from solicitor and move into partner? Was that the process that you took?
Yeah, I mean, for me, Elliot, it was always looking at how do I progress in my career, and the natural progression in the career is to go from being an employee to becoming a business owner. And in a legal firm, more often than not, that involves going from being a solicitor to becoming a partner. And that ultimately is you putting your money where your mouth is and saying, I actually want to buy a stake in that business and take responsibility for its delivery, how it will succeed financially, and ultimately for all the employees that we've got and all our other stakeholders in the business.
And with that journey and going back on the partner story, I was recently in America, and you can certainly tell with the fact it's just called the McKinstry Company. It's not like the New York or the American law firms. When you drive along and you've got the billboards, but it would be like McKinstry and Honeyman, and they just continually mention every surname, and you can always tell when it's like a family business. For example, if it was your family, it would be like Honeyman, and Honeyman. So I can see the UK certainly hasn't adopted that American approach.
Not at all, Elliot, but my kids couldn't get their head round when I then became a partner why it was still just the McKinstry Company. They're like, Dad, why isn't it called McKinstry, Honeyman and McQuiston? Because one of my colleagues who became a partner at the same time, Fiona, And they couldn't get their head around that. They said, Dad, but I thought you were a partner. Why is your name? And I think they've probably been watching too much American TV.
I was going to say, watching Suits, you want your name in the wall.
Exactly. Why have you not got a big corner office, Dad?
Go and moving on from partner, and the next point is you've gone from partner of the firm. And I think in every business, and you look at most corporate structures from a business sense, you'll have your employees, your management team, senior management team, the board of directors, but fundamentally there's that managing director. In this case of law firms, the managing partner. That must be some achievement from you, from essentially no family being involved with law, going through Strathclyde University, coming out Strathclyde University to virtually no opportunities, to then being with a company that grew your law career, only really working for one law firm throughout your career, to now becoming managing partner of that law firm. Talk me through how that came about, and how does your role now differ from the day-to-day being a solicitor to now being the managing partner of McKinstry Company?
It's a bit of natural succession, I suppose, Elliot. I mean, Graham, who had formed the business and was integral in pretty much everything that happened in the McKinstry Company, and a lot of my evolution as a lawyer, that Graham took the view, as everybody does in life, that there is other things to be doing in life and it's time to bring through the next generation. And we as a business have always looked very carefully at succession, because if you don't plan the succession of the business, then the business dies. And Graham was very focused on that, and he brought Theona and I into partnership at the same time. And we then evolved as partners. And as Graham was looking to step back as senior partner, we'd always been very clear that there had to be one person to lead the business, but equally one person where the buck stops with them. And I was asked to take that role as managing partner, and I was keen to take it, and I was happy to take it, but it's a lonely place, Elliot. That's the one thing I learned very quickly, and Graham did tell me, he said, it's a nice position to have, but it's a responsible position, and it's pretty much a position which can be a bit lonely at the time, was what I thought, because you've got to make a lot of decisions. But very quickly, you realise that everybody else in your team wants you to succeed, and they are as invested in your role as you are in the succession and success of the business. And with the great team that I've got around me, with my partners and with my colleagues, it makes that job a whole lot easier. And my job now is less about the day-to-day. I do loads of the day-to-day, but it's not 100% of the day-to-day work. It's probably at least a day a week in terms of doing the management side. And it's not allocate one day and the other 4 days or something else. And it just depends what's going on. But I mean, typically I will say maybe 20-25% of my week will be doing management stuff, and the rest of it will be doing the day-to-day work with clients. And I like that balance, because I love dealing with the clients. I love looking after my clients and meeting the people.
Robert, a fantastic story, taking you through from the start, going through your uni days, becoming partner to now managing partner of the firm. So really appreciate you telling us that story. Next, we are going to get Robert involved in the Tenor Challenge, plus finding out what drives Robert Honeyman to give back locally just after this.
This is Elliot Boyce.
And this is Ayrshire Insights.
Now it's time to talk community, charity and Ayrshire pride. But Robert, before we find out about your links to the community, we're looking for listeners to get in touch and let me know what Manny's to get for a tenner this week. So the question's over to you. What's your bargain of the week that you've managed to get for a tenner?
So the weekly bargain, Elliot, was unfortunately not from an Ayrshire business, so I get a strike for that, but it was a new putter head cover off Temu, which I'm told is coming locally, so it's not coming from China, but it's coming locally, and it was less than a tenner, which compared to the other brands was going to cost me a small arm and a small leg.
Fantastic, and you can tell we've got the lawyer on today because he's not mentioning any brands in case we get sued. But don't worry, Robert, I know a good solicitor will be coming to you if anything like that comes out in any of the other shows. But thank you very much. So Robert, back to you. Why support local causes like Now Ayrshire Radio?
Well, I suppose, Elliot, our mantra as a firm is all about build relationships. It's all about get to know our people in Ayrshire. It's about invest in Ayrshire, invest in our stakeholders. We can hardly, as a business, say that to the people of Ayrshire and say it to our prospective clients if we won't actually commit to that and do it. And we've always been about Ayrshire is a wonderful place to do business. You can get all the services you need pretty much on your doorstep. You don't need to go to Glasgow. You don't need to go to Edinburgh. You don't need to go further afield. There are amazing businesses in Ayrshire. And I don't think a lot of people really grasp that, but we do. And where we can support local businesses, local charities, whatever it might be, we want to do that.
What does that local feeling mean to you?
I suppose answerable to your clients and being answerable to the people. And for us as a business, when that means when you're out and about, I'll leave the office and have a wander down. For those who know where my Ayr office is, it's just in the corner of Newmarket Street. I'll have a wander down Newmarket Street, a lovely bustling street in Ayr, full of lovely independent shops. You'll meet clients regularly. And those are clients that will stop you in the street for a bit of chat. It might be folk that you're currently doing business for. It might be folk you've done business for in the past. And that's about the local connection. But importantly, Elliot, it's about being able to look them in the eye and be able to say, well, look, you know, we're doing a transaction for you. I've got your back. We're looking after it. We'll make sure everything's all right. And you're there, you're available for them to chat to. And that's the important thing of being local. It's not that you're stuck in a big city and you're completely anonymous.
Personable.
Correct.
And you're there. It's not just the man behind the phone. You're actually there and you're meeting, speaking to people who live in your community.
Yep.
Now, we can get back onto the community aspect and the social value of you, Robert. I know that you've recently smashed the London Marathon. Tell us a little bit about that. And by the way, congratulations on that one.
Cheers, Elliot. I don't know if I smashed the London Marathon or the London Marathon nearly smashed me, but it was a brilliant experience. Tremendous. And for those who know the backstory to this, there's a sad story and there's a very positive ending to this. And the sad story is that my colleague Lindsay, who had been diagnosed with cancer around 18 months or so before we embarked on this journey, that she had set out when we were starting down the road of our charities of the year, which were kicking off in 2024, that we nominated those charities of the year. And Lindsay's nomination was Ayrshire Cancer Support, because they'd been there for her, they'd been there for her family when she needed the help during her treatment. And her and I had a chat, and she said, I'd quite fancy it if we did something that put you through a bit of pain. Lindsay was all about kilt walks. She walked all the kilt walks. She loved doing sponsorship. She loved it. She was a walker. And she quite fancied something that was a bit of a challenge and an endurance. And I said, well, I'd try and get into the London Marathon. So I applied for the ballot, never again. And I thought that story was over and was finished. And then a chance conversation with Ayrshire Cancer Support, and we were talking through the story, and at that point, Lindsay was fairly poorly and she wasn't able to come into the meeting. And in that conversation that I had with ACS, they said, well, leave it with us. Let us ask the question. And I stupidly and flippantly said to them, if you get me a spot, I'll get you 10 grand. And it was out of my mouth before I even thought about how much support that was going to require to get 10 grand.
And you signed here.
Yeah. And within a week, they phoned me and said, we've got your place. And I said, right,
Brilliant.
okay. And this was September last year. And I said, right, okay. Thought twice about it. Then 30 seconds later, I said, right, great. Signed up to it.
So you had the place. Yep. Now you had to find 10 grand.
Well, the two things I had to find was 10 grand and 26 miles on my legs.
Totally.
And ultimately, the balance with that was that I knew what I was doing it for. Yeah. And I was doing it for Ayrshire Cancer Support. And I was talking to Sandra actually about this on Monday when I was out seeing the wonderful new facility in Ayr. And she asked the same question. And I said, well, look, my pain in reality was temporary. I knew that inside 4 hours, it was done and I could walk away from that wonderful experience. But what the money we were hopefully going to raise was going to do was help those people whose journey was going to be months and years. And The sad story is Lindsay never got to see the end of that journey. But the positive outcome was, with the support of tremendous folk locally from Now Ayrshire Radio, and in terms of everything that Keith and Ewan and Ali and Michael were able to do to terms of help us promote that story, we managed to raise £12,200 for Ayrshire Cancer Support, which was amazing. And that was the positive end to what had been a fairly difficult journey.
A devastating story and a massive achievement, and congratulations from everyone here at Now Ayrshire Radio to raise such fantastic amount for such a great cause.
Cheers. Thanks, Elliot.
And I think touching on that, cancer affects everyone, and I think no matter who you are, everyone's got a story of whether it's someone who's directly close. Everyone knows somebody who's been through, whether it's a survivor or someone who's unfortunately lost their life with cancer. And causes like Ayrshire Cancer Support and various charities that are out there supporting people do such good work to help people who really are in the worst point in their life.
Yeah, I mean, I've been involved with Whiteley's for long and weary, and it's an amazing charity, and a charity that does so much. And the team at Whiteley's, Maxine and her team, in terms of looking after kids and families that are going through stuff that for me and for many people is fortunately almost unimaginable. But to be able to do that, and to do that in a wonderful local charity is just phenomenal. And from our perspective as a business and as the people within the business, things that we can do to help that, whether that is promote it, whether that is fundraise for it. At the end of the day, people always say with position comes responsibility, and that's what we see as a business. We are stakeholders. They are stakeholders in our businesses. We are stakeholders in the local community, and where we can put back, then we should.
And that touches back on the local feeling. And then the people of Ayrshire are a really strong community. And with that local feeling, whether it be businesses, whether it be individuals doing what they can to support local causes and local people, that's what being part of Ayrshire and being part of that local feeling is all about.
100%.
Now, McKinstry Company clearly have done so much with charities, yourself and the challenges that you've put through. But onto yourself again. What other links do you have to the community? I've heard that you fancy yourself as a bit of a Robert Burns fanatic.
I suppose I'm a bit of a Burns fanatic, but I enjoy the work of Burns, and I suppose that's an excuse to go to a lot of Burns suppers and drink a lot of whiskey, Elliot. In reality, I love my food and I love my whiskey, and Burns was a good way into that, and it was a good way into a lot of camaraderie, decent nights out. And I've been a member of Lars Cronies Burns Club for 20 odd years. I am past president there as well, and it's just a great way of meeting folk and going to decent nights out.
And you like a bit of poetry as well?
A wee bit of poetry. I don't claim to be any expert at Burns, but and you don't need to be. I mean, at the end of the day, Burns is not. People think, Burns, you have to be able to recite Tam O'Shanter and do it standing on your head with your blindfold on. It's not about that. It's about, does it engage you? Do you enjoy reading a few lines of it? Does it get you to go and meet folk and go and enjoy a night out in January when the nights are dark and the weather's horrible? A
great story. Great to hear about you, your links with Robert Burns, the amazing things that you do for local people, charities, along with the McKinstry Company. Really appreciate that one, Robert. Now, we are going to finish strong with a round of 5 fast ones, but we're going to do it just after this.
Now Ayrshire Radio Podcast presents Ayrshire Insights with Elliot Boyce.
Now Ayrshire.
If you've just tuned in, I'm with Robert Honeyman, the managing partner at McKinstry Company. Now, Robert, it is time for 5 fast ones. I don't want you to think about it. Just shout out the first answer that comes into your head. Are you ready to play 5 fast ones?
Let's go for it.
What's your favourite takeaway?
Chinese.
Song that always lifts your mood?
Timmy Trumpet, Freaks.
Best things about Ayrshire?
The golf courses.
Weirdest moment at work?
Got to be the Cats.
Who plays you in the movie of your life?
Michael Fassbender.
Massive thanks for playing 5 fast ones. We're going to be asking our guests every week to get involved. And Robert, a massive thank you for joining me on Ayrshire Insights. You are this week's local legend here on Now Ayrshire Radio.
Great, Elliot. It's been a pleasure.
Now, before we get going, Robert, have you got any final shout outs you would like to say hello to?
Thanks to the family, all my colleagues and everybody at Now Ayrshire, and it's been great to see the team back on air.
Robert, massive thank you.
Superb.
Now Ayrshire Radio Podcast presents Ayrshire Insights with Elliot Boyce.
Now Ayrshire.